Nope, not about redheads either. Still about him. Welcome back, everybody, for what is part 2 of my epic costume making for, Sigyn, Loki's wife from the comics. If you haven't watched the previous video, which is right here, editor, do your thing, I would highly recommend that you do, because it explains a little bit more of the story involved in his wife that I kind of made up, kind of took from the comics. It's just a fun costume. So, that being said, I say we jump right into this, because it took me about 3 months or more and a really tight deadline to get this done, so let's go.
Hey, look, it's voiceover Jewel time. So getting straight into it, I ended up buying this high density EVA foam, which is what makes up a majority of the armor that is for this costume. And that's pretty much what we're working with to start out, so let's get into it. This next part is sped up for convenience sake, but I was basically cutting out pieces that were needed out of the EVA foam in order to make the crown. And I had made a mock-up design out of paper first to ensure that it was the shape that I wanted and that I knew where all of the more decorative elements of it were going to be. This was also my first time working with EVA foam. I have never used the material before this and had to look up a lot of videos and tutorials to figure out what the heck I was doing when it came to layering things and what size EVA foam I needed. And in this case, I stuck between 2mm and 5mm EVA foam. I mostly used the 5mm EVA foam for my chest piece. The next part of this involved me smoothing out the pieces that had rougher edges, and for that you use a Dremel tool. In which case I ended up switching between 2 different bits. One was to get out the really rough stuff, and then the other one was a smaller, softer sanding bit, just for smaller stuff. I'm gonna say this took a lot of getting used to using the Dremel tool. Again, not something I was super familiar with, but we do have it around, so that's what I ended up using. I'm pretty sure you could also do it with sandpaper, but it's probably not gonna give you as smooth of a result. So this is unfortunately where I made my first mistake. I ended up using the Dremel tool a little too much on the fins, and I ended up making a hole in it that I have to fix. We will get back to that later. So for now, I started actually gluing things together, and I ended up using rubber cement, which is what's recommended for putting this stuff together. And I wasn't sure why, but later on in the video, I had a lot of trouble actually using that. For whatever reason, the rubber cement didn't want to stay sticky or keep anything together, so, and I don't know if that's because of the temperature in which I kept the rubber cement in, but I ended up using super glue, actually mostly, for the rest of it. Back to fixing that previous mistake on the fin from earlier, but I ended up buying air dry foam clay, which is kind of like a clay that you mold that inevitably dries as foam. And in which case, I thickened up where I messed up on that one fin quite a lot and blended it in to make sure that it would look seamless once it dries. About a day later, when I knew that the foam clay had dried thoroughly enough to work on it again, I ended up taking my wood burner and wood burned all of the designs into every piece of armor. And I mean every piece of armor. All in all, this was actually probably my favorite part of this process. I really like little details like that in costumes, so I really took my time to make sure that all of the designs were mirrored, especially on the fins, and were pretty much perfect. After putting the details in the fins and a lot of the other armor, you're supposed to take a heat gun and run it over the EVA foam to seal it, I found out. And I also did this so that I could shape the fins to be rounder behind the head. Also, do be careful not to burn yourself on the heat gun. I ended up testing it on my palm just to make sure it wasn't hot enough to hurt me or melt the EVA foam. So this next part was another mistake. In which case, the rubber cement, like I had mentioned earlier, was not sticking together, so I ended up getting out my hot glue gun and regular super glue in order to re-glue everything back together, and in which case I had to make sure that the super glue in particular stayed on the inside of the costume and didn't show on the outside of it. In which case, after re-gluing everything together, the next steps were a repeated process of wood burning the designs into the costume pieces, and reheat sealing everything to make sure that the EVA foam was harder and more stable. After that is when we got to another one of my favorite parts of this project with the help of my friend Kay, and in which case I'm just gonna let that video play out because, my god, it was absolutely hilarious.
I made a grave mistake in giving my best friend a roll of duct tape and saran wrap.
No.
No, we're just doing this the old-fashioned chaotic way.
Yep.
Yeah, maybe the X way is the way to go, because
Right, and then I will go.
we'll go like that, in a round, and then and then maybe up around this one, and then
I'm not gonna be able to do it that way. I'll have to come around under.
and this is gonna be the weirdest YouTube video I've ever done.
Alright, now I need to figure out how I'm gonna do this.
Well, what you could do is start with one, and then when you come back around,
Okay.
do it.
Okay, and then how does that? So, try to figure out how to keep your tits. Like, I get to use duct tape on somebody. I'm having a blast.
Kinky. Anyway.
I'm more or less that. I would say more psychopathic or crazy, but okay. We can go that way.
Poor Davey's gotta watch all of this shit. Oh my god.
He's not gonna know what the heck to do with this.
No, probably not. Cut here.
So like this part is gonna be like right here.
Yeah.
Alright, so just generalizing here.
So is this one?
Oh, Grandma, you're the camera.
This one right now?
Grandma,
I'm just checking to see if it's right now.
yes, also we are filming. Oh, there we go. There, we got the cast. Woo!
Yeah, she got tits!
Now, unfortunately, after we had made the chest plate out, was when my friend Kay had an idea. They decided to trap me in duct tape.
Surprise!
That's enough!
Okay, 1 second, 1
Okay,
second.
that's enough! You can draw anywhere else but that. Having fun.
Yes.
I'm slowly losing circulation to my hand.
Anyway, back to the actual costume making, and not the chaos that was me getting trapped in duct tape. That being said, I ended up taking these small little golden beads to glue onto the EVA foam before it was painted, so that it was a bit more textured in its look. And then finally, after gluing everything together and making sure everything was sticking together well enough, we finally got to the painting. Now obviously, Asgardian armor is usually golden. Like a lot of gold, actually. So in which case, I started with a layer of brown, because that makes total sense. Don't worry, it'll make sense in a little bit. So I started with a first layer of brown at the very bottom of it. After that, I finally got to the gold. I will say the golds that I picked out, I actually had to put on more than one layer. I do believe it was 3 different layers. And in which case, the brown at the bottom is now starting to make sense. It actually helps make the gold look rougher because you don't actually want to paint a solid gold coloring because that's just not as pretty. It doesn't look as antique either, which was the look I was kind of going for. I then once again repeated the same painting process for the chest piece, and honestly, this whole project was coming along really well despite it being my first time and quite a few mishaps here or there. Once all the paint had dried, we could finally seal the deal, and in which case I ended up using this brand of sealant, and I ended up testing it all beforehand. I think I bought like 3 different brands of spray paint to test to make sure that it was stress tested and it was as shiny as I wanted it to be. And in which case that was the one that won. So let's seal everything. Oh, and before I forget, do be sure to do this in a well-ventilated area or have a spray mask on of some kind. Don't inhale the fumes. Once I had everything painted and put together, it was time to make it so that things would actually stick in place and that I could place the costume on and off of me. To do this, I cross-hatched where I was going to hot glue the Velcro straps, and that's what I used to make sure that they stick together. I did have some issues with said Velcro straps falling off of the costume, and, well, you have to work with what you've got, in which case what I bought, so I probably would not recommend doing what I did, but it's what I had at the time. Also, because the glue was very hot, during this time I took a very heavy metal hammer top from the garage and used it to press down on the Velcro and hot glue so as not to burn my fingers, and it kind of instantly cooled it as well, which, I don't know, maybe that's what contributed to said problem of Velcro straps falling off, but hey. With everything that I wanted done on the costume done at that point, I also decided to just do a prop at the last minute, in which case it was going to be a spear, which I also kind of did a rough design for in the meantime, and I took 2 thicker pieces of EVA foam to slap together to make it thicker. So for the handle of the spear, or the middle part of it, I decided to take a old, I think, tent stake it was from our shed that we had lying around, and decided to use it. After that, it was once again back to routing the EVA foam in order to get the shape the correct way that I wanted it. So once I got the shape absolutely perfect, I decided to take it inside and also do some last minute wood burning into it.
Hello everyone, it's me again, and we are just doing a quick little interruption because things got a little messy here at the end. I was trying to meet a very strict deadline in April when I did this costume, so some of it did not get recorded, unfortunately. So if it seems like things are not following along in this next part of the video, yeah, I forgot to record.
To get the details on the top of the spearhead correct, and my uncle also ended up helping me with this project, and we used an old Lego motor and fit it into the metal pole in order to make the spearhead spin. And I also threw on some extra added details off camera as well onto the pole itself, and in which case I decided to spray paint the entire thing in gold. And with that being said, let's go on to some of the final pictures and see how it all came together.